Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Sandra Wiley. Hi, Sandra. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Hi, John, and hello, audience. It's good to be here again.
It's always a fun conversation. Most of you know Sandra, but Sandra is the president and shareholder here at Boomer Consulting, and she spends a lot of her time, among other things, working with firms in the area of talent, right? I'm not sure there's a more important topic than talent today, or at least a more popular topic than talent today. And the theme of our conversation is talent strategies for great firms. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're automatically a great firm, but Sandra's going to dive in here in this conversation of what are some great talent strategies we're seeing out there. So Sandra, I'll start with just kind of a big question to set things up here is, why is it important for firms to even be thinking about having a strong talent strategy?
Well, let's start with the world today. When you think about talent strategy and think about why should we even be concerned, or why should we focus there? Our world has changed. We have shifted. And so there are strategies great firms are using to really get a leg up on making sure that they are protected for going forward. We have heard for years, John, you and I have been talking about for years, the war on talent, right? And I think a lot of people thought it would get better over time. It has simply shifted. There's still a war for great talent. There's always been a war for great talent. I just think there are things you can do today in your firm to really create the right strategies for attracting the best people and then keeping the absolute superstars that you want. So I think there's some great new strategies out there, or maybe some that we can sharpen the saw a little bit on, right? Make it a little bit better. We've been working on them for years, but how do we make it even better?
Yes. And over the last year, 18 months or so, it only feels like the talent war, so to speak, has increased and become more intense.
Yep.
Right. That's driven by, a lot of things. But the truth of the matter is we all want great people at our firms, and great people have options. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into this with you, Sandra. So as you work with dozens and dozens of firms in this area, what are some of the great talent strategies you're seeing?
Well, I think there's five that I think that are the most important for you to be focused on right now. So as you're listening to this and you're taking notes, what I would suggest to you is think about your own firm and kind of grade yourself on, have we really stopped long enough to do some of these things? So the first one is just talent design. Who are you trying to hire, and what positions do you need them in, and what are the skills you need them to do? So how are we going to either reskill or upskill or maybe even outskill some of our people so that we have the right design for the firm of the future that we're trying to create? And so I think that's the first thing, is stepping back and really strategically taking a look at who you're really trying to hire. The second one, we have got to be thinking about the distributed workforce. A lot of people are calling it remote work, but I don't. I think it's just distributed. Where are people going to work today, and where is it going to make them most effective? Some will work part-time from home. Some will work full-time from home. Some will work from Alaska. I have one client that she literally is a principal in her firm, and she and her husband have a trailer, and they travel all over the world, and all over the United States, South America, and she works from wherever she ends up being that day. It's a distributed workforce. We can find great people and let them work in lots of different ways and lots of, and it's working. And if you're one of those people that's sitting out there right now, say, well, but it's not working for us. Well, then you're not trying because there's no reason the technology and the processes and everything can't let it work. It's all about mindset. The third thing, collaborative intelligence. How are we going to collaborate with the technologies that we have, and collaborate with the people we have, and collaborate with other firms that we know to really make an intelligent decision and intelligent workforce? And so I would want you to really think about using technology as it's almost like another person sitting in your firm. How can we use technology to really up our game? The fourth thing, you're going to think this is a silly one. And I think now, John, you and I won't think this is silly because we know that this is true. Protected strategic time. We need to make sure that we are giving not just ourselves as leaders, but everybody in our firm time to do the work that we ask them to do. Don't get them so scheduled that they can't really take time to take a breath and really use their time effectively and being strategic. And I think I've seen more firms now that are actually, stopping all calls, stopping all meetings for certain parts of the day so that they can really get work done, so they can be very focused. And I think that's working well. The firms that are doing it are not taking that time away again. They are actually adding to it. They're saying, well, we did it on Tuesday afternoons. Now we're going to do it on Thursday afternoons too. So really giving yourself some strategic time. And then the last thing is, we've been tracking metrics for years in our firms, years. What we have not been tracking is HR metrics. And maybe some of our HR professionals have, but our leaders, our partners have not been taking those very seriously. So really finding some good HR metrics to track and to look at daily. How long did it take you to hire someone? How long did it take for them to accept an offer? How long, what are your retention rates? What are the turnover rates? So really taking a look at what are some metrics that plug into the strategies that we have that we can see whether we're really winning this talent war that we're out to get. So those are 5 things that I would suggest that our firms start looking at. I only get a few minutes to talk about each one of those, so I can't talk in long-winded conversations, but I think those are 5 that will really get firms started going the right direction.
Those 5 are fantastic. And I do know you could spend all day, and you do work with firms all day on these topics, creating strategies, around them. One, though, that I want to cherry pick and just hear you speak a little bit more on is that distributed workforce. Yeah. So I think kind of what has happened over this last year or so is, all of a sudden one day we had to go remote. Yep. And there was a lot of figuring that out. Now that we're starting to come out of that, the conversation is, okay, how do we create strategies to let our teams either continue to work remotely a little bit or, ask them to come into the office a couple of days a week. But then the firms that are going on past that are saying, how do we, in the new kind of talent marketplace, how do we hire fully remote talent from the get-go so we can get the best and brightest no matter where their zip code is? Yep. Sandra, are you seeing firms doing that? And if so, what are some ideas around how they're approaching them?
Absolutely. And I think that is one thing that progressive firms are going to win at when we're talking about this whole war of talent out there. I think if you open your mind to, we could hire a experienced experienced niche leader, experienced data analytics person. We could hire them, but they don't have to be here. We can hire them anywhere, right? I think that is going to be the norm going forward. And here's the deal. If you're open-minded enough to do it today, you will win this. I mean, this is going to be a big feather in your cap, right? If you decide not to do that, the people that are working for you may actually be out there looking for a new position today, and they're going to look across the nation to find something. And so they know they're in a win-win position, right? They can go out and find anywhere else to work if your firm's not open to letting them work remotely. And if you're looking, man, there's some great resources. So we know of 4, and let's see if I can remember them all now. Accounting Fly is a resource that a lot of people are using to recruit. Beach Valley is another one. Sapro, S-A-P-R-O is another. And then Paro, P-A-R-O is another. And all of them are resources where you can go out and instead of just using Indeed or Monster or someone like that, you can actually recruit through those resources and you can find great people. And they are getting flooded by people across the nation that are looking for great positions out there. And what people are wanting is, I want more flexibility and more time to work at home. And if my firm won't do it for me, then I'll find a firm who will. And that firm could be your firm if you just are open-minded enough to look. So I also think I would also tell you what we're seeing is that people that are in firms today, this pendulum has swung, right? 18 months ago, let's go to the end of 2019. You and I, John, had a lot of people who were saying, yeah, that whole remote work thing, that's not for us. We want our people in our office. We want to have them in our office every day. And then March of 2020 hit, and everybody went to working from home in literally a week. I mean, everybody just went, okay, we're all working from home. And those that had done their technology well picked up and went home and worked. And those that didn't do technology work still did the same thing. They still all went home and worked. They had to pick up desktops and things like that, but they still made it work. I think the pendulum is going to swing back to somewhere in the middle of all that. It's not going to be fully remote. It's not going to be fully in the office. It's going to be in the middle. And I just heard from a really great top 100 firm yesterday that said they had just done a poll with their clients or with their team members. And the team said, look, if it was a perfect scenario, we'd have 3 days in the office and 2 full days at home. And they heard that from about 80% of their team. So, think about how that's going to change that workforce piece. They're going to have office space for some times and not for other times. And it's going to change the whole look of how that firm is. But they're excited about the fact that they can do it. They're not pushing back on, we can't do it, we'll figure it out. And I want everybody on this call to be thinking about, how do we figure it out? Not about how to go back. How do we figure out this new blended, distributed workforce? So.
Right. That's great, Sandra. And you just touched on my next question, and you can take this any direction you wish, because I know there's a lot of examples you have, but what are just, one, maybe 2 success stories of firms that are actually embracing some of these trends? And it's not always perfect, right? But they're pushing forward and they're experiencing some successes. Can you share some of those stories?
There's probably a million of them out there, but I'll just touch on a couple. We have a large regional firm in the Midwest that they decided to go to the blended, more, I'll just call it blended. Some people call it hybrid, but it's actually a blended workforce. And they're working closely. Their HR department is working closely with all of the different areas of the firm. So tax, audit, consulting, and all the different niches or segments of the firm. And what they're doing is they're finding ways to figure it out, right? They're having great communication. They're talking to their team. They're also doing a lot of work with the team to teach them how to be productive at home and how to be productive. How do you set up your workspace and how do you deal with kids at home and all of that. So they're doing a lot of work around the wellness part of this, not just the work part of this. So it's a blend of, not only is it blending where you work, it's how you're going to work, right? So they're doing a lot of teaching and training there. What they are not doing is saying no to anything. Anytime an employee comes to them and says, look, my kids are working at home now, or they're still doing school at home. I have a husband that now works at home and now I'm working at home and I'm just trying to figure this out. They're having their performance coaches are having good conversations with each person and they're figuring it out. They are not trying to make it a one size fits all. So I love the fact that that particular firm is using performance coaches and they're using communication methods to really make sure that their people are taken care of. They think at the end of the day, that will net them huge benefit in retention. So, and I think it is working, no question. We have another firm that they're doing something similar, but they're really trying to set it up so it's a little bit more consistent in when they're working in the office. So certain groups of people, so they're not doing it by individual, they're doing it by teams of people. So think about an audit team. I have this audit team, they work together. Well, most days they can work from home, but on certain days they need to be together in the office collaborating. So they set up a schedule and they say, well, this conference room, so they're not necessarily hoteling in separate individual little spaces. They're hoteling in a conference room, and that team, it gets together and they come together. So they can work from home probably 4 days a week. that one day that they're collaborating together, they're making it intentional to get together in the office. And I loved that model because it wasn't so much every single individual, it was groups of people that collaborate together, and then they could go out and do their work and then come back together when they needed to. So I thought that was another interesting story about remote work. So those are just a couple. I'm sure there's a million of them out there, but that's a couple that I think are a little bit different. So
yes, and it's always good to hear real life examples of some of these strategies. So Sandra, one thing we try and do on this podcast, as you know, is ask the question, how is this topic that we're discussing today in context of the accounting profession, how is this relevant to outside the accounting profession? Because oftentimes that can help us learn new insights. How are you seeing this topic of talent strategies relevant outside the accounting profession?
Well, I don't think talent is all that different between an accounting firm or a medical company or a trust company or anybody else you want to talk about there. People are people. They want flexibility. They want to be heard. They want to be communicated with. They want to be valued. They want to know that you are tuned into not only what they're doing for you in work, but you're tuned into their health and their wellness and what they need there. There's no difference there. So I think everything I just talked about in relation to an accounting firm, you could take it and plug it and play it into any one of your clients that are out there and how they need to be helped these days. So I know some of the firms that we work with, and maybe some of the ones that are listening today, are starting a HR niche where they're going out and helping their clients. Everything I just talked about is what you need to be prepared to talk to your clients about because it's the same.
Yep, absolutely. And there's also the angle, Sandra, especially as firms hire new types of people, maybe new positions, as they look to offer more services that require different expertise. We're now competing with non-accounting firms for talent. And if other professions are more progressive in this area and offer more flexibility than we do, we're going to be losing out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is interesting, John, to hear some of their businesses that we wouldn't have thought about as competitors before. They will be competitors going forward. And we have to be prepared for that because it'll be a different landscape that we're navigating than we've ever had to before.
Absolutely. So Sandra, this was a great conversation. Our listeners are probably really tuned in right now and thinking, all right, we have to do some of these things internally. We need to have conversations at least, internally. But my question to you is, what's the one next step you might recommend to our listeners that if they do want to end this podcast and go back and start to have those conversations, what's your recommendation for their next best step?
Well, I always talk about having an HR strategic plan. So I think I would start with that. But I also will tell you that I think the one thing that is setting apart a lot of the firms that are really doing amazing things is they have a peer network. And I must say, I feel like it's kind of a pat on our back or, a plug for Boomer Consulting, but I'm going to plug it because I think it is so important. We have our talent circle that I think people need to if you're an HR professional out there, or if you're a managing partner who has an HR strategist that you work with, you need to have them check into our talent circle because I am convinced they're the best of the best. Those talent circle people that are in that group, they're the best I've ever seen. And if you're not a part of that, then you're missing out. And then we have a learning and development circle that just started because L&D has bubbled to the top this year as one of the most important pieces of a firm, learning and development. And if you're not in that particular community, you should be. So I would say that's what I would say, strategic plan, and then get involved with the peer community, deeply involved.
Awesome, Sandra. Thank you. And as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for being on this episode of the Boomer Briefing. And for our listeners out there, if you like this topic, please know that we talk a lot about talent on this podcast, but we also talk about several other areas of your firm, whether it's process, technology, growth, leadership. And so every episode we are rotating through the different types of topics we discuss. So please subscribe to this podcast, and we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. So please stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you so much. And thanks, Sandra.
Thanks, audience. And thank you, John.